Well, good Palm Sunday to you. We are going to teach out of the book of John this morning. If you have your Bibles with you, I'd encourage you to turn to John chapter 12, beginning at verse 12 through verse 27. John chapter 12, verse 12 to verse 27. This is one of the passages. All the Gospels speak of this account, but as we go through this is the traditional account of Jesus coming into Jerusalem. I've titled the message this morning, it's really a challenge for me, and I pray and hope that you are attentive and that God will challenge your heart this morning with this question, which is the title of our message. How do you view Jesus? How do you see Jesus? And we're going to read this account this morning here, and we're going to see all these different crowds of people, and they saw Jesus, but they really didn't see him. John chapter 12, verse 12 says, "On the next day, much people that were come to the feast," that's the feast of Passover, "when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem," this is what they did. They took branches of palm trees, that's how we get Palm Sunday, "and went forth to meet him, and they cried, Hosanna! Blessed is the King of Israel that cometh in the name of the Lord. And Jesus, when he had found a young ass, he sat thereon, as it is written." That's a young donkey that no one had ever ridden on. It said, verse 15 says, "Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, thy king cometh, sitting on an ass's colt." Now, verse 16, John's so honest here. He says, "These things understood not his disciples at the first. But when Jesus was glorified, then remembered they that these things were written of him, and that they had done these things unto him. The people, therefore, that was with him when he called Lazarus out of the grave and raised him from the dead, they bear record. And for this cause the people also met him, for that they heard that he had done these miracles." So it's talking about, here's a crowd of people that is coming over. He has a crowd of people with him coming over the Mount of Olives as he goes down to Jerusalem, or goes up to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. Verse 19 says, and here's another group. "The Pharisees therefore said among themselves, Perceive ye how ye prevail nothing? Behold, the world is gone after him." And so there was another large crowd that was going out of Jerusalem, out of the city, running towards him as he's descending towards the Kidron Valley there. Verse 20 says, "And there were certain Greeks." Here's another group, and this is where we get the title of the message. "There were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast of Passover. And these Greeks came therefore to Philip." May have been that they felt more comfortable with Philip because Philip was a Greek. "And they say, Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we want to see Jesus." We would like to see Jesus, or we would, King James, we would see Jesus. "Philip cometh and told Andrew, and again Andrew and Philip, they went and they told Jesus. And here was Jesus' answer. And Jesus answered them, saying, The hour is come. The Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a grain or corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. And now is my soul troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour." Here is the Palm Sunday. This is Palm Sunday, a picture of this triumphal entry. All four of the Gospels record this event, about this entry into Jerusalem, with all the people observing, with all the people watching. It must have been an incredible sight. How many of you have ever thought about time travel? Be honest. There's a number of you. That's good. I've thought about it too. Time travel. If we could time travel, where would you like to go? And don't tell me you're here from the future, because we have somebody that you can talk to after the service. So, okay? Don't tell me you're here from the future, please. But where would you like to go? Would you like to go back to see the dinosaurs? Would you like to go back to the Civil War time, the Revolutionary War time? What is it in history that you would like to go see? Just imagine this, folks. Just imagine being able to witness the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ. Imagine what that would have been like. To witness, actually take part in and witness the earthly ministry of Christ, to see his face, to stand back at a distance and watch his face as he communicated with the people, to hear the tone of his voice as he talked to people, to see the expression on his face, to watch his body language. It's interesting because John, in his first epistle, see, John experienced that. In John chapter 1, in 1 John chapter 1 and verse 3, I think it's verse 1, look at it. That which was from the beginning, look here, which we have heard and which we have seen with our eyes and which we have looked upon and our hands have handled of the word of life. He says, for the life was manifested, and we saw it, we've seen it, and we bear witness and show unto you that eternal life which was with the Father and was manifested unto us. Look at verse 3. That which we have seen and heard declare we unto you, that you also may have fellowship with us, and truly our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. This is interesting. John, as he writes his first epistle, he says that which we have seen, that which we have heard, that was which we have laid our hands upon. He says those things had an everlasting impact on us, and we desire for you. As he's writing this letter, he says, we desire for you the one we've seen and heard and handled. Think about this. We have a great desire for you to experience as much of that as you can through us, he said. And this was after the ascension into heaven. John still saw him. John still saw him. Now I want to ask you the question that sets the stage for this. How do you see him today? How do you see Jesus today? You're here today and you're not a Christian. If you're not a Christian, if you're watching by way of the internet, watching live this morning, and you're not a Christian, how do you see Jesus? How do you view him? What can we see of him? This day here that John writes about here, this day where Jesus rode into Jerusalem, this is the 10th of Nisan, Christ coming into Jerusalem. It's a very specific day, very specific. In fact, you go back to the Old Testament, it's on your screen, back to Exodus chapter 12 in verse 3. It says, speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, look here, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their father. A lamb for a house. And so the Old Testament, 4 days prior to Passover, 4 days prior to before Passover, each family took a lamb. It would have to be examined to make sure it was without spot and it was without blemish. History says that this 10th day of Nisan or Nisan, however you want to pronounce it, this 10th day of Nisan, it said 200,000 lambs were brought into the temple precincts. 200,000 lambs. Jerusalem had a population of about 600,000 people any given day. But at this feast here, it would swell to up to as many as 3 million people. 3 million people. And as they came on this 10th of Nisan to the temple precincts, each one brought a lamb. Each family brought a lamb, and it was examined to see if it was spotless. Do you remember in the Bible, we've talked about it, you may have read it. Do you remember when Jesus got angry and didn't sin, and he was in the temple precincts, and he turned the money tables over? He said this is a den of iniquity. He called them a brood of vipers, or they were, I forget the scriptures now. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Your pastor forgets the scriptures. But it was a den of iniquity. He called them a bunch of thieves. He called them a bunch of thieves. You know why? Because they were scamming people. They were ripping them off. If you traveled a long distance, you brought your sacrifice. If you traveled a long ways to Jerusalem, they made sure that they would take your lamb, your sacrifice, and they would examine your sacrifice, and by golly, they would find something wrong with it. And you know what they did? Oh, by the way, your lamb, we can't use this lamb because it has a blemish on it, but you can buy one of ours. We're selling you, we have a bunch right here. We're going to sell you. We'll sell you one right here at twice the price. And so they were ripping people off. They traveled so far, they couldn't go back home and get another one. So they were forced to buy what they were selling. And if you came from a desert, if you came from Rome, if you came from the Roman territories, most of your currency they had was Roman coinage. Well, they didn't take Roman coinage. They did, but you had to exchange it in order to use it. You had to exchange it for the shekel. And the exchange rate was out of the world. So they were ripping these people off. And this is why Jesus went into the temple and turned the tables over. They ripped people off. And as this big circus is going on in the temple, Jesus, here comes the Lamb of God into Jerusalem to be examined before everyone. To be examined by everyone. And listen, he set all of this up. He did. All throughout his ministry, all throughout his earthly ministry, from the wedding at Cana, from when he turned water into wine, all from that point on, I mean, to healing the man with leprosy, to healing the blind man, he told them, don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. When he fed the multitudes with bread and loaves and fishes, they wanted to make him king, and he sent them away. But here, this scene right here, he is setting it up all by himself. He says, go over into the city, disciples, you'll find a colt. You'll find the foal of an ass, loose him and bring him to me. And if anyone asks you about that, tell him the Lord has need of it. The Lord has need of it. God has need. That's really interesting. But it says, tell him that the Lord hath need of it. And so he saw this ahead of time. You'll find the colt. This is what people are going to say to you. And if they ask, say the Lord has need. The Bible said here, his hour had come now. His hour had come. He's arranging everything now. They're yelling, blessed be the King of Israel. He's receiving it. The religious leaders want to put him to death, but they decided not to on the feast because it would create such an uproar. But he's riding into Jerusalem. He's receiving their praises. He's having them cry out. And John says that all of this happened so that the scriptures might be fulfilled. In fact, the religious leaders wanted the crowd silenced. Stop saying he's the Messiah. Stop saying he's the Son of David. But Jesus said if they stop, the very rocks themselves would cry out. The very rocks themselves would cry out. His hour had come. The Word of God was being manifested in time. If you go back to Genesis chapter 49 and you look at verse 10 and verse 11, we're going to read it here this morning. Jacob, he was on his deathbed. Jacob was, and this is what he said in Genesis 49, verse 10 and verse 11. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. And unto him shall the gathering of all the people be. Verse 11 says, binding his foal unto the vine. Well, who's the vine? Jesus is the vine. And his ass's colt unto the choice vine. He's the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. Jacob on his deathbed referred to the choice vine. That was Jesus. In John chapter 15:5, Jesus says, I am the vine. You are the branches. Bound, he says here, Jacob says in Genesis 49, bound to this colt. Time was rolling out. The word of God was being manifested before their eyes. And then we have scriptures in Jeremiah, and then we have scriptures in Daniel chapter 9 that talk about the 483 years. We're not going to get into that. But all of that time, if you study the time of all of that, lead up to this exact day when Jesus Christ rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, and he challenged the people. Jesus did in the book of Luke in chapter 19, and he said, if only you had known this thy day. Because it had been foretold of. And it happened exactly as it was laid out in the Old Testament, scriptures. Here's what's important too. This had to happen. Jesus is orchestrating this. We watch all the crowds and all the people around him in general. Some are flooding out of Jerusalem. They heard about him raising Lazarus from the dead. Some are coming off the mountain with him. Certainly that group of people would have had Lazarus with it. That would have had blind Bartimaeus with it. Imagine the crew that was there with them. And the people are ready to receive him, but he isn't who they think he is. There's an anticipation in this crowd. There's a buzz. There's a frenzy. There's a great level of expectation. And they're hoping that he would overthrow Rome. That Jesus, this guy that's riding in a donkey, that he was like Moses. He was like the Moses who delivered our people out of Egypt. He's the great deliverer. But now this Passover, they would be delivered from Roman bondage. That's what their hope is. That's what their hope is. They're hopeful that this is the one. And you know what's interesting? His disciples didn't even know what was going on. Because it was during this same period of time in this scene that they're arguing and they're fighting over, who's going to sit on his left side? Who's going to sit on his right side? Who's the greatest in God's kingdom? Which one of us, They had no clue as to what's going on. And so the people all the people that were there cannot discern who he is. They see him. They see him with their eyes. But they don't see him. And Luke's gospel tells us that Jesus is convulsing. That he's crying. It's not, Jesus wept, I'll give you a tear. He's convulsing. He's crying over this. The religious leaders didn't see him accurately. They were trying to kill him. Imagine what Rome thought about all this. Imagine what Rome had thought. Rome, the great oppressor. Rome. The great oppressor, the one who bullied everyone into submission. Rome. To them, Judah was a huge headache. Rome had built the Antonia fortress adjoining the Temple Mount so that they could keep an eye on what was going on in the city. They wanted to keep the trouble down. So Rome understood that there was a level of expectancy. This was the Passover, when God had delivered the children of Israel from Egypt. They knew there was a heightened level of expectancy. So Rome, they watched very carefully. What did they think? What did Rome think when they saw this one lone figure in the middle of all these crowds of people on a donkey? Well, I found this out because I think this is pretty interesting. Rome had what was called the Roman triumph. Okay? The Roman triumph was a civil ceremony. Listen to this. And a religious rite of ancient Rome held to publicly celebrate and sanctify the success of a military commander who had led Roman forces to victory in the service of the state, or originally and traditionally one who has successfully completed a foreign war. And he had to kill 5,000 men, 5,000 confirmed men dead. And on this day of Roman triumph, the general wore a crown of laurel and the all purple, gold embroidered triumphal toga regalia that identified him as a near divine or near kingly, and even was known to paint his face red. He rode in a 4-horse chariot through the streets of Rome in unarmed procession with his army, with his captives, and the spoils of his war. At Jupiter's temple on Capitoline Hill, he offered sacrifice and the tokens of his victory to the god of Jupiter. This is what the Romans were accustomed to, the Roman triumph. Then these captives, they would take their captives and they were taken to the Colosseum, and then they would throw them and feed them to the lions. The Roman triumph. And here they look, and there's this big stir. There's this huge stir going on. And one guy in the middle of the stir on a donkey. This must have been a joke to those people. They probably laughed. Now, there was a tradition. There was a rabbinic tradition that said if Messiah came and Israel was ready to receive her Messiah, that he would come on a white horse. That was their tradition. The tradition also said if Messiah came and Israel was not ready to receive her Messiah, he would come on a donkey. That was the tradition that they held to. And let me tell you, they were not ready. They were not ready. But they will be ready because he's coming again on a white horse. He is going to come on a white horse. And it's just like in Jesus' tradition, God's tradition. He I don't know if he has a tradition, but he always saves the best for last. Because this isn't really the triumphal entry. The triumphal entry is still coming. It's still ahead. And every eye is going to see him. Every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess. But here he comes, and it's interesting to watch because no one really knows who he is. Their perception is wrong. Did you know that America, I got to parallel this to us. Did you know that America claims to be extremely religious? Do you know that? America claims to be extremely religious. 7 out of 10 Americans claim to be Christians. And that can mean anything in this culture. 6 out of 10 claim to be born-again Christians. Some have said that America is the most religious and the most secular on earth at the same time. We talk about our spiritual beliefs, but our faith is not reflected in our morals and in our ethics. If you look at the statistics with this nation, with abortion and with immorality, it does not reflect 7 out of 8, or it does not reflect 6 out of 10. And how does that part of America, listen, how does that part of America see Jesus? How do they see him? How do we view Jesus? Maybe you're here today because you want to see Jesus. Maybe you're a part of the Christmas and Easter crowd, and you came a week early because you thought you'd miss the rush next week. How do you see Jesus? How do you see Jesus? Because we have that crowd. It exists. How do you see Jesus? Maybe you're really here maybe you're here today because you really want to be here. How do you see Jesus? Did they see Jesus here in the text? What about those Greeks? The Greeks said in verse 20 and 21, and there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast, and the same came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and they desired him, saying, "Hey, we want to see Jesus. We want to see Jesus." They came to Philip and said, we want to see this guy. Now these Greeks, they knew that Israel was monotheistic. They knew that Israel believes in one true God. But they didn't know how to see him. They didn't understand how to see him. They've been hearing of Jesus, and they come and they say, we want to see him. And so Andrew and Philip, they go to Jesus. The Greeks come to them. Andrew and Philip go to Jesus, and they say, hey, Jesus, bunch of Greeks, they want to see you. And Jesus doesn't go, okay. I have an opening in my schedule at about 2 o'clock. He didn't say that. He did not say that. Well, look what he says. Verse 23. And Jesus answered Philip and Andrew, saying, here's his answer to the question. The Greeks want to see you. The hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified. He says, my hour has come. Prior to this, over and over and over again, he kept saying, my hour is not yet. My hour is not yet come. And now for the very first time, in verse 23, he says, my hour is come. And he says that the Son of Man should be glorified. And then he says, let me tell you this, Philip and Andrew. Let me tell you this, guys. Verse 24. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a grain or corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. Now, this was Jesus' response to they're approaching Jesus saying, hey, the Greeks want to see you. This is what Jesus said. My hour has come, the Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a grain of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. Now, I can picture Philip and Andrew going, huh? The Greeks want to see him. The Greeks want to see you. I can see Philip and Andrew walking away, scratching their head, saying, oh, what do we say to the Greeks? What do we tell the Greeks? He says, if you want to see him, this is what you have to understand. The hour has come. He's going to be glorified. A grain of wheat abides alone. Nothing happens. Goes into the ground, dies. It brings forth much fruit. Got it? See you guys. That's what they told the Greeks. But listen to what he's saying. Listen to what he's saying. The Greeks wanted to see him. Philip and Andrew went to Jesus and said, the Greeks want to see you. Now listen to what he says. You really want to see me? You really want to know who I am? There's only one way to see me. That's to see me dying. That's to see me buried. That's to see me rising again. And that's the only way to see me. That's who Jesus is. He's of the tribe of Judah. He's the Jewish Messiah. That's who he is. He's born of a virgin. He was crucified. He's risen on the third day. He's ascended into heaven, and he's returning very soon. That's who Jesus is. You cannot see him through any other lens. That's who he is. And I think we have to take note of this. Because there's a lot of people out there that say Jesus this and Jesus that, and everyone's got Jesus. I've heard that. Everyone's got Jesus. Oh yeah, I'm really into the man upstairs. Me and the man upstairs are really tight. There's a lot of people who use the same vocabulary, but they use a completely different dictionary. They have the same God speech. They have the same jargon, but it's not the Jesus of the Bible. And the crowds are like that today. The crowds were like that here. The crowds are like that today. They see him, but they don't see him. And as soon as you talk about sacrificing your life to find him, boy, the crowds really thin out. The crowds really, really get light. Because that's not the Jesus they care to hear about. Look at our religious leaders today across the world. Think about what they are saying. Think about who they are ordaining today. Think of what they are saying that can happen in the church, and how they make fun of or push away the idea of sin, push away the idea of atonement, push away the idea of repentance. Look, religious leaders today, they want to get rid of Jesus too. The Jesus of the Bible, that is. And the government is much the same. But look what he says in verse 25. First part of verse 26. And he that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, what does he say? Let him what? Follow me. But he says, let them follow me. Follow me where? Follow him where? Well, go back to verse 24. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a grain or corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. If a grain falls into the ground and dies, and it bringeth forth much fruit. The following of Christ is to follow his example. The laying down of your life. If he says, if you seek to save our life, we lose it. If he says here in the scriptures, if we let go of our life, you'll find it. And you're only losing it because you're trying to hold on to it. Let go of it so you won't lose it. What's Pastor Jeff saying? What's he saying? Carnal Christianity and the non-believing world, if you decide to follow Christ, if you decide to use him as your example, if you decide to let go of your life so that you will attain it, retain it, the unbelieving world today will look at you and they will say, you are nuts. They will say, this is a waste of time. You're throwing your life away. You have no purpose. And you know what? Everyone wants purpose. Everyone wants purpose in their life. Everyone wants value. Everyone wants worth. Someone who goes to medical school for 10, 12 years of their life. 10, 12 years of their life. Go to medical school. They're never home. They're never around their family because it's a huge commitment. They're never around their family. Endless hours. They got dark circles under their eyes. They use no-dos to stay awake. You know what our culture would say about those people? They are committed. They are dedicated. They are devoted. But if I say, or you say, hey, I don't take part in that any longer. I don't get involved in any longer. I go to church Sunday mornings. I go to church Sunday evenings. I go to church Wednesday nights. You're a fanatic. You're a nut. You're a loose cannon. There's something wrong with you. You're a Jesus freak. You've somehow lost your mind. People don't say, oh my, they're dedicated. Oh my, they're committed. Oh my, they're devoted. Nope, you're not. You're not. Do you know Peter says something about that in the Bible? If you go turn back to 1 Peter, I want to show you this. 1 Peter chapter 4, and look at verse 3 and verse 4. 1 Peter 4, 3 and 4. He says, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked, look here, in lasciviousness, lust, excessive wine, revelings, banqueting, and abominable idolatries, wherein they, those are your old friends, your friends, they as the friends, wherein they think it strange that you run not with them to the same excess of riot, and they speak evil of you. They wonder why you don't party anymore. They wonder why. They wonder what happened to you. They wonder why you carry that big Bible to church around with you. They wonder why you don't drink anything, why you don't smoke anything, why you don't use anything. And they think, what a waste. What a waste. What are they doing with their lives? And then it says in verse 4 of 1 Peter 4, verse 4, it says, your friends, they will speak evil of you. That's what it says. You know why? Because your life is straight. Not perfect, but because it's straight and you're walking with Christ. And I got to tell you, they have the wrong impression. You're not a nut. They have the wrong impression of you. And on the other side of that, Christians can give the wrong impression sometimes. Can't they? You ever met that Christian that goes, "Oh, I'm so dedicated. It's such a cost to follow Jesus." They're Eeyore Christians. You know, who wants to be a part of that? I've sacrificed so much. I've given up so much of my life. Oh, shut up. Shut up. You haven't given up anything. You haven't given up anything. The Apostle Paul says in Philippians chapter 3 in verse 7 to verse 8, Paul says, what things were gained unto me? What things were gained unto me? He says, those things I counted loss for Christ. Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I might win Christ. Paul said they are dung, and I won't interpret that word for you this morning. He says, I count them all lost so that I may know Christ. That's what I gave up, so that I might know him. And listen, Jesus has given us everything. You haven't given up anything. He has given up everything. In fact, if you look at Philippians again, and you look at chapter 2, and you look at verse 5 to 8, look here. Philippians 2, 5 to 8 says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man in the flesh, he humbled himself, and he became obedient unto death, and not just death, but even the death of the cross. He gave up everything. Jesus did. He's the one who sacrificed for us. And he's offering us here. He's offering us right now. Do you really want to see who I am? Do you really want to see that? Because the crowds didn't see it. The soldiers didn't see it. The religious people didn't see it. Rome didn't see it. The Greeks came. And Jesus said, this is the way it is. My hour has come. Who I am, why I am here, what I'm all about is just about to come out into the open, is about to be exposed so everyone can see. And it's about laying down my life. It's not about overthrowing Rome. The bondage that, it's like Jesus is telling these people, and he's telling us, you and I here this morning, that the bondage that you're in is not material. It's not physical. It's not political. It's not economical. Rather, the bondage that you're in is to sin and death. That's what he was telling them. It's to sin and death. And unless I die in your place, you're going to perish. And I am here to lay down my life for you, to rise again so that many would come into the kingdom of God. And he said in verse 26, if any man serve me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. If you want to serve me, Jesus said, follow me. And you'll realize what life in this world is really worth compared to eternity. Look, if you desire to give your life to Christ today, if you desire to give your life to Christ for the very first time, I offered this last night at a funeral message. If you're watching by way of the internet, watching live us this morning, if you desire to give your life to Christ today, it doesn't mean that you become a robot. It doesn't mean that you become an android. It doesn't mean that you are somehow a non-entity. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that you have to act Christian, because I don't even know what that is. It doesn't mean that you have to lose your personality. It doesn't mean so much of what you see on TV or in the... It doesn't even mean that you have to enunciate your words. It means what Paul said when he said, we come to know him. We come to know him and still be a man and still be a woman with an identity, with a personality, with one that God uses, one that he sets on fire for him, one that he brings all of the potential out of. And then he fills our life with hope. He fills our life and gives us a much anticipated end unto an inheritance, incorruptible, undefiled, eternal in the heavens, reserved for you. That's what he gives us. He gives us a purpose. He gives us a life. He gives us a higher purpose. And so here it is. This challenge for us, this challenge for me, here it is stop making excuses. I hate excuses. I do. I realize we have them. I have them. But stop making excuses. You're a Christian. Who is Jesus to you? Who is he to you? How do you, as a Christian this morning, view Jesus? Now let me tell you, we just lost in this life one of our dear sisters in this church, Mrs. Blake, Doreen Blake. She was like a mother to me. She has encouraged me more. She has encouraged me second to my wife in ministry. She's probably partly responsible for me still being in the ministry. When I think of her, how did she view Jesus? How did Doreen Blake view Jesus? Well, to Doreen Blake, Jesus was her very life. Not that she was perfect, but he was her life. She told me one time, she's writing out, she says, when I write out a check to give to the Lord, she says, I can hardly restrain myself. And I told her, I said, the Lord loves a cheerful giver. She says, I love giving to the Lord. That's how she saw Jesus. How else did she see Jesus? She loved to take widows to doctor appointments. She loved to go visit some of our widows and our shut-ins. She loved to go to the nursing homes. She loved to fill these track racks around the church here whenever they got low or all screwed up and confused because people didn't put them back in the right sections. She loved that. How did she view Jesus? She never complained about it. How did she view Jesus? Jesus was her life. How do you see Jesus? How do you view Jesus? Is Jesus your life? Or is he just a crutch to get you through whenever life gets tough? Is he something you put around your neck to let people know that you're spiritual? Is he a Christian t-shirt for you that says, I stand for Christ, when in reality you've never stood for any of his principles? How do you see Jesus as a Christian? How do you view him? Is he your life or is he a crutch? If you're here this morning and you don't know Christ, if you're here watching live by way of the internet and you don't know Christ, maybe you're saying, well, if I could only see him, if I could just see him one time, if I could just see a miracle, get saved, you'll see a miracle. If I could just see something, then I would give my life to him. Then I would believe. No, you wouldn't. Look at verse 37 and verse 38. It's not on the screen, but look at verse 37 and 38 of John chapter 12. But though he had done so many miracles before them, yet they believed not on him. That the saying of Isaiah, the prophet, might be fulfilled, which he spake, Lord, who hath believed our report? And to whom hath the arm of the Lord been revealed? They saw all of his miracles. They witnessed all the things that he did. And they didn't believe. Look, if he's reaching out to you today in love, if he's challenging your view of who he is, if he's saying you need to get together, you need to come together with me, you need to be serious. You know, I died for you, and you know it, and you keep putting it off, and you keep putting it off, and you keep putting it off. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do you know what continued rejection produces? Hard hearts. A hardness of heart. Don't continue to push Christ away. Don't allow others to push you away. That happened here too in our text. Look at verse 42 and verse 43. Look here. Nevertheless, among the chief rulers also, many believed on him. The chief rulers, many believed on him. But because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. Some people refuse to make that step because they're afraid of getting put out of the club. They're afraid because of peer pressure. And the problem is, we get into that frame of mind where we are more concerned with the voice of man than we are the voice of God. Folks, do you see Jesus today? Do you see him today? Here he comes. Here he comes in our text, riding into Jerusalem so that we can examine him publicly. Here he is. How do you view him today? You know, when the worshiper came and they brought a lamb for the examination, when they brought a lamb to the sacrifice, a lamb to the examination, the lamb wasn't pushed aside and the worshiper examined. That isn't what happened. That's not what happened. The very reason for the lamb made very clear the idea that the worshiper was a sinner. And the reason he brought the lamb is because an innocent substitute had to die in his place. It was never the worshiper examined in that process. It was the lamb. And listen, if you're here this morning and you don't know Christ, God is not here to examine you. He's not here to examine you. He has already given his son to die in your place. The fact that you would come to him at all is a confession that, Lord, I'm a sinner and I need your grace. But Jesus is the Savior. He died, he rose again, and if we say that I'm willing to lay down my life and follow you, Jesus, what does that look like to you? I don't want to play Christian. There's enough of that going on in our culture. There's enough of that going on in the church. I don't want to play Christian. I don't want to be part of the religious circus. I don't want to be part of the religious parade. I want to see Jesus. I want to see Jesus. Do you want to see him? I pray that you do. Let's stand this morning. Lord, there's a lot of shams, there's a lot of scams that go on in the church. There's a lot of phoniness. There's a lot of participating in the circus, participating in the parade. And all we see Jesus, but we don't see Jesus. There are Christians walking through this on this spiritual journey, fat and happy, and starving to death spiritually because they don't see Jesus. Help us to look at you this morning with a deeper understanding of just who you are and why you came for us. Lord, help us not to have any expectations from you in terms of what we think should happen or what we think should be. But yet let us just trust you with our lives every moment that you give us. If we do that without expected anticipation of what we think should happen, Lord, we're more inclined to stay on track and to grow deeper. These crowds here in John chapter 12 and as recorded in all the Gospels, they had an expectancy. They had something in their head that they thought was going to happen, that was going to take place. And they missed the whole kit and caboodle. They missed it. God, help us. Help us not to miss the sweetness of knowing you, the sweetness of seeing you in a deeper way. Help us to stop playing and stop being a part of the parade, but to see you for who you really are. We love you. We thank you this Palm Sunday. We thank you that you came into Jerusalem. We thank you that you went out the other side to Golgotha. And we thank you that you went to the cross as me instead of me. Speak to our hearts this week. Challenge us to see you, Lord, to really see you. We thank you, and we do pray it in Christ's name. Amen.